Today on Keep Classical Weird, Dr. Sophia Taggart joins us to tell the story of one of the most famous love triangles in classical music history. And as usual, she has an incredible modern-day comparison for 2 out of the 3 involved in the triangle.
They remind me of Beyonce and Jay-Z.
That is actually a really, really good comparison.
Right?
Yeah.
They're both talented, but come on, Beyonce.
Welcome, friends, to episode 15 of Keep Classical Weird. I am your host, Casey Bozell, and today we'll be discussing one of the most famous love stories in classical music, the love triangle between Robert Schumann, Clara Schumann, and Johannes Brahms. Our resident music historian, Dr. Sophia Taggart from Washington State University, is here to guide us through this tale. Let's dive right in and introduce our 3 sides of the triangle, starting with Robert Schumann.
Robert Schumann, pianist, composer, music critic. After studying law, he wanted to pursue music.
He studied law?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he studied law, and then he decided he wanted to pursue music. So he went along that path, and that's how he came across Friedrich Wick.
That's Clara's dad.
Clara's dad. And then he started studying with Friedrich and would work with him and study. And he knew Clara from like the age of 9 or something. Eventually, Robert was injured. He injured one of his fingers because of this crazy exercise and these devices he would put on his hands to make them stronger. It actually like hurt.
Oh,
I remember it was one of his ring fingers, I think, and so he couldn't play and become a famous pianist. So then he started composing a little bit more, and then eventually founded the New Music Journal in Leipzig and became a music critic and was an advocate for other composers who were trying to make a name for themselves, including Johannes Brahms.
all right. So he meets Clara through her dad.
Through her dad, yeah.
Right? And he meets her as a little girl.
Yes. And I think she has a bit of a crush on him from the start because I guess she composed a romance variation of some sort for him when she was young and said, "Here, this is for you."
They kind of fell for each other.
I'm hoping Robert didn't fall for her when she was still that young. I that would be a little scary. But I think if you look at some of the stuff he wrote about her when she was younger, he said, she's a smart kid, very precocious, and he didn't really seem all that interested in her, like even just, he's like, oh, whatever, she's the daughter. I think it was when she started coming of age, maybe 16, 17, 18, I think that's when maybe he started noticing her.
Like she showed a talent for piano and composing like early on, right?
Oh, she was a child prodigy, and that was partially because her dad, I mean, today we talk about stage moms, right? But her dad was a stage dad. His wife left them when Clara was 4, and he raised her from a young age by himself, and he was really strict with her, and within 5 years of raising her on his own, she's touring Europe already on piano. So he wants her to become a world-renowned pianist because he wants to prove that he's the teacher who got her there. He wanted to sell his method, essentially. I think maybe the same method that injured Robert Schumann.
And she and Robert fall in love. Which,
Yeah.
how did Clara's dad feel about that?
Oh, he was not happy about it at all. At all. I mean, it was like a star-crossed lovers situation at that point because Clara and Robert were in love. They wanted to get married, and Friedrich was like, over my dead body. And this was maybe when Clara was like 19, and she and Robert sued her dad to get her emancipated early so she could marry Robert.
How old did she have to be to be like
21. So like you know, people got married before 21, but they had to have the okay of their parents, or you know, it had to be something that was approved. It wasn't until she was 21 that she would have been able to marry without his permission. And so Robert and Clara sued her dad to allow the marriage to happen, and the whole process took forever long. By the time they finally won their case, she was almost 21 anyway. And they actually got married, I believe, the day before she turned 21, just to like thumb their nose at her dad.
Wow.
Right?
That had to have been incredibly awkward with the relationship that Robert already had, like going to study with him, and then all of a sudden they had to turn around and sue him.
Yeah.
I mean, that feels like that he might as well just like challenge him to a duel or something. But
I know.
Wow.
It's so dramatic.
Do they have kids?
Oh my God. They have 8 kids.
8?
Yes. I think she has 1 or 2 kids within the first 2 years of marriage. And all the while, Robert's composing and running his journal. And then Clara is touring and performing Robert's music. Robert's conducting a lot of the orchestras when she plays concertos. They're career oriented, and Clara is composing as well. I mean, they're both very active, and it's kind of amazing how their lives progress, and their careers especially, because they don't have a lot of support from family. Obviously, her dad's not going to want to help out. Robert's family, I don't think, is financially flush with cash, so they struggle somewhat. Yeah, they just continue to have these careers. I mean, now Clara always made sure that hers didn't outshine Robert, which was kind of hard because Clara, by the age of 20, was one of the leading pianists in Europe. Leading pianists in Europe at that time included Clara Schumann, Franz Liszt, eventually Chopin. You know, I mean, those are the 3 names. Obviously, she's incredibly famous, and more so than Robert, to be honest.
But she downplays her own career to not outshine him, or he insists that? How did that happen?
She makes sure she doesn't really focus on composition. So she writes a few compositions here and there, some of which are just phenomenal, like her piano trio, which Mendelssohn himself said was like amazing. But she knows that that is Robert's area, you know? Like, she plays the piano, he creates the music. And she doesn't to infringe upon what he's doing, because we still have all those antiquated gender roles governing society at that point in time. So she's very careful about what she does. And if she goes anywhere, she always plays music by Robert Schumann, you know, and she makes sure that he's there and he gets his accolades as well. Robert Schumann, great musician, great, nothing wrong there. I'm not saying that, you know, Claire was amazing and Robert was awful. No, both really amazing. But really, when you think about it, Clara was like the queen of classical music. They remind me of Beyonce and Jay-Z.
That is actually a really, really good comparison.
Right?
Yeah.
They're both talented, but come on, Beyonce. So that is Schumann, Clara and Robert Schumann. That's who they are, really.
All right, so things are going swimmingly. They have a ton of kids. They've got these careers. Yes. And even though they don't have a lot of support, things are going along. And then somebody else enters the picture. And how does that happen?
Johannes Brahms. Oh, He stole my heart. Okay, so Johannes Brahms gets a letter of introduction from Joseph Joachim. They're good friends. They've played together, and Joachim says, you should meet Robert Schumann and Clara Schumann. So he sends Brahms to, I think it's like Dusseldorf, with a letter of introduction. And so he ends up meeting Robert and Clara. They immediately just think he's wonderful. You know, he's a great pianist. He has a good skill for composition, and he is young. He shows up, and I think he's like 20 when he shows up to meet them.
Oh, wow.
And he's just this cute little blonde, beardless boy who plays piano really well and who immediately kind of gets adopted by the Schumanns. And so he's meeting with them, and that's actually when everything goes to pot for the Schumanns. And it's not Brahms's fault. He's not the angel of death or something, but okay. He starts falling in love with Clara. 5 months later, Robert Schumann has a breakdown, and he walks out of their house one morning, hangs a right, and goes to the Rhine River and just jumps in, and he tries to commit suicide. Bam!
Just pretty out of the blue?
Yeah. Just, well, I should say, yes, kind of out of the blue, but at the same time, like, he's suffered from depression, and he's had little episodes here and there. Clara said that he would get up in the middle of the night and go write down a melody and say that the angels sang it to him and he had to write it down. Or, he hears things and so there's a bit of a psychotic element to his general life, and then he suffers from depression to begin with. And so really Clara just chalked it up to, that's what makes him such an amazing musician and a great artist, and that was something she knew was a thing with him. With that said, yes, he just up and gets up one morning and runs or goes over the river and jumps in and tries to kill himself. So then he gets taken to an asylum where he stays for the last 2 years of his life. And during those 2 years, Clara's not allowed to see him. His doctor won't let her see Robert, but Brahms ends up being the go-between. He goes and visits Robert and comes back and tells Clara how Robert's doing.
Wait, so why was that? We don't know.
I don't know. Probably because she was, a poor, meek woman who wouldn't be able to handle seeing her husband.
Okay.
Yeah. A woman who had pushed out 8 babies.
I was going to say, she seems so fragile already. So she has to stay at home, but the doctor's like, oh, but this guy that's living with you, he can come.
Yes. And right after Robert went into the asylum, Brahms moved to Dusseldorf to help Clara support her family while Robert was in the asylum. Yeah. And then Robert's in the asylum for 2 years. Clara doesn't see him. And then finally, Brahms came back towards the end of Robert's life and was like, oh, yeah, Robert's fine. And because the doctor didn't want Clara to know what was going on, but she started getting suspicious because she's a smart woman. And so she goes and eventually finds out that Robert hasn't gotten out of bed in like 2 weeks or something. And then she goes to the asylum and sees him. And it turns out he has pneumonia and he dies 2 days later. She and Brahms remain close friends for the rest of their lives. It's interesting. Brahms, in a way, takes over the role that Robert had, where when Robert was composing, he always wanted Clara's opinions or help with his compositions. That's kind of what happens with Clara and Brahms. They remain good friends. She starts playing Brahms's music on all of her concerts, but they never get married or officially become an item. She then goes on to have a career for almost up till 6 years before she dies. So her career in music lasted like 6 decades. Really, from the point when Robert dies, that's when we see Brahms start writing a lot of his big works that become incredibly famous. That's like the stuff that carries him through to the end of his life. So it's so fascinating the way that all turns out. between those three people.
And we know this about all of them because of like letters that they've left behind, right? Like we know about their feelings for, and especially Brahms and Clara, we know about their feelings for one another through these letters as well, right?
Okay. Yeah. It's clear that they have a friendlier relationship than she had with Joseph Joachim, who she was also very close with. But I think in the letters, it's clear that she has a much closer relationship with Johannes Brahms. Obviously, she's a strong person because she can have a career for 6 decades. She's, one of the leading pianists in Europe, but also her dad put her through the ringer to make her be able to perform under like the worst circumstances ever. There's stories about how her little brother died and he made her play a tour like 3 days later, like start a tour. I mean, this is like a woman who can have the absolute worst thing happen, and immediately go on stage and perform anything and everything. And she talks about some physical pains that she had before going out on stage and stuff that other people, us mere mortals, would be like, I can't play. And she just went and barreled through it. And yeah, I mean, she's a tough woman. I mean, I know it's like a love triangle between the three of them, but in my opinion, it's just Clara being awesome and the other two guys are all right.
I love that. And that's our show for today. Many, many thanks to my friend Dr. Sophia Taggart for her storytelling and general awesomeness. The theme music you're hearing is by Thomas Barber. Check out more of his stuff at thomasbarber.com. Web development support is provided by Tina at citybeautifuldesign.com. Keep Classical Weird is created and edited by me, Casey Bozell. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon. Our Craziest Opera Tournament is still going on, so make sure you vote on social media or by sending an email to keepclassicalweird@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Stay safe and stay weird.